Well, joining me now is the Labor member for Parramatta, Andrew Charlton, a member of the House Economics Committee. Andrew Charlton, thanks for your time. After the Dunkley by-election, we've had a couple of weekends which have been a bit tough for Labor, although they're still trying to form government with the Greens in Tasmania. You had the Queensland by-elections and now this Tasmanian result. Does this show you're in for a tough fight at the federal election in a year's time? Does it also show that people are moving away from the major parties a bit?
Well, good to be with you, Andrew. Obviously, those state results are a matter for the state parties, but it's true that the Queensland by-election results were tough, but then by-election results are always tough for incumbent parties. We're focused on the national level at delivering for all Australians. Our tax plan, for example, has just delivered a tax cut for every working Australian, and that's 87% more than the Liberals were offering. So I think that shows that when it comes to the next election, people will know that the Australian government is focused on the issues that matter to them.
I wanted to ask about the low unemployment figure during the week. You've got a background as an economics advisor to a Prime Minister. It was 3.7%, it was down. Do you feel this means we'll have to wait longer for interest rate cuts, as such low unemployment usually means inflation's a bit stickier?
Well, you're right. This was a really remarkable result in those unemployment figures. And for me, those unemployment figures really show two things. First, they show that the government's plan is working. In 2 years, we have got inflation down, we've got wages up, and we've delivered a budget surplus. And the second thing they show is that the opposition really doesn't understand the economy right now. They have spent 2 years saying that if we lift wages for the lowest paid workers, that will cost jobs. And in fact, what's happened is that we have delivered the largest growth in employment in Australian history. No government has delivered more jobs than the Albanese Labor government. In terms of what that means in the long term for interest rates, that's a matter for the Reserve Bank, who act independently. But from our perspective, we're focused on getting inflation down while not having a big spike in unemployment. And at the moment, that's what we're seeing, which is good news for Australians.
Well, OK, it's also been an interesting week for your former boss, Kevin Rudd. Do you have any concerns about him remaining in that ambassador's job if Donald Trump becomes president? How will he negotiate what he said about Trump before to where he is now?
Look, the main concern I have is that we continue to take a Team Australia approach in relation to our ambassadors around the world. One of the best things about Australian politics is that we always put domestic politics aside, and no matter who's in power or no matter who appointed an ambassador, both sides of politics support that person. Labor did it with the two previous Liberal appointees, Arthur Sinodinos and Joe Hockey. And so it's very surprising that the opposition has done a bit of a backflip on their position on Kevin Rudd and started to undermine our ambassador in Washington. I don't know why Peter Dutton is doing this. I don't know whether he's trying to suck up to Donald Trump or whether he's just trying to score some political points. But it's really damaging for Australia for us not to take a Team Australia approach and support our ambassadors no matter who they are or who appointed them. I think on this very program, Andrew, Peter Dutton said just a month or so ago that Kevin Rudd was doing a good job and was respected on both sides of the aisles. That was true then and is true now. So I hope that we can come together as both sides of politics and support our ambassadors, which is the right thing to do.
All right, I wanted to ask you about the religious freedom changes. You've got a very multicultural electorate there in Parramatta. Obviously, this is of interest to your community. A lot of people there would oppose these changes. Do you think they have the ability to offend communities or cause schools of faith to have to do things they don't want to do?
Look, this is something that we talk about in my community all the time. As you say, Parramatta has people from every faith and creed, and this is a really important issue for them. It's a really important issue for schools. It's a really important issue for students, for teachers. When we talk about this issue, everybody agrees on one thing. Everybody agrees that we need to make sure that all Australians feel respected. And the second thing we agree on is that this issue is too important to be a political football. We can't allow it to become politicised, And that's why the government is taking the approach that it has taken, which is to say we'll work on this issue in a bipartisan way and try and bring people together to make sure that everybody feels respected, whether they're a student in Parramatta or a religious school or a person of faith. They all matter and they all have to be respected.
Now, as a member of the Parliamentary Economics Committee, you have concerns in terms of grocery prices. You yourself used to work as an executive for the Coles organisation, and you're saying today that Australia has the third highest grocery prices in the G20 and that our groceries are 33% more expensive than the UK. Take us through this, and how much of this is due to the market domination of Coles and Woolworths?
Well, you're absolutely right, Andrew. Australians pay very high prices for groceries. In fact, Australians pay 54% more than the world average for food, and that's been established by a number of sources. And what that means is if something costs $10 in another country, Australians might be paying $15 for it. And Australians are entitled to ask why. Why, when we're a nation that produces so much food, are we being charged such high prices? And look, one thing that is well known in the grocery industry is that the executives of the big companies that deliver food into Australia refer to Australia as Treasure Island. They call it a place where you can charge higher prices and make bigger profits than other countries around the world. Now, let me give you one example. In the beer industry in Australia, 8 out of 10 beers are owned by just 2 foreign companies. Those 2 foreign companies have amassed 80% market share, and they charge Australians some of the highest beer prices in the world. Now, the Liberals have never taken this issue seriously. They did nothing for 10 years, but now we finally have a government that is taking it seriously. The Labor government has created an ACCC investigation into supermarket competition. We've also got Craig Emerson out there making sure that small suppliers aren't being taken advantage of by the big supermarkets. And we've also appointed Choice, the consumer group, to crunch the data and tell us which supermarkets are charging the most. So for the first time...
All right, but just on that, though, we hear a lot about inquiries and, the ACCC one's going to go for a year. What can practically come out of this that is going to help consumers here?
Well, honestly, Andrew, I think a lot can come out of this. And you just need to look at the last Labor government, which did take this issue seriously. We had a similar ACCC inquiry, and lots of things that made a real difference came out of that inquiry. Let me give you a couple of examples. First of all, we cracked down on Coles and Woolworths abusing small suppliers. In fact, in 2011, we took Coles to court and they had to pay $10 million over their abuse of small suppliers. Secondly, one of the things that came out of the last ACCC process that the last Labor government put in place was to expand competition on a local level. We made sure that Coles and Woolworths couldn't continue to do what they were doing at the time, which is to put restrictive clauses into their leases, which told the shopping centres that if they had a Coles or a Woolworths in the shopping centre, they couldn't have any other competitors. We phased those out during the last Labor government. That came out of one of the inquiries. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. We're taking this issue seriously. We're pursuing it methodically through these inquiries. And I expect similar positive results for competition and positive results for consumers to come out of those inquiries.
Just nearly out of time, Mr. Charlton. Just finally and briefly, is there price gouging going on? And are bonuses to the CEOs, such as we saw to Brad Banducci, who stood down recently, partly responsible for that?
Well, we have some of the most concentrated sectors in Australia. As I said, if you walk down the beer aisle, 80% of those products are owned by 2 companies. If you walk down the shampoo aisle in Australia, those hundreds of products, more than 50% of them are just owned by 2 companies. Where you have lots of market power, you often have excessive prices. As in your words, price gouging. I'd call it higher prices than other countries pay, which is not a good thing for Australian consumers. And that's what we have to look at. And that's why this government is taking this issue seriously through these processes, which I expect to deliver real results for Australian consumers.
Parramatta MP Andrew Charlton, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.